Good evening. I'm LaEunice Brown, Family and Community Engagement Specialist. This webinar is brought to you by Chesapeake Public Schools Office of Family and Community Engagement, or FACE, Family Insight and Kempsville Behavioral Health. I have here tonight my FACE partner, Lisa Carey, Marie Renner, Director of Community Relations for Kempsville Behavioral Health, and Danielle Riglioso, Director of Family Insight, PC in Virginia Beach. Tonight's topic is parenting during the pandemic. I want to remind you and let the audience know that you can put your questions in the chat box, and the speakers will answer throughout, and there may be some questions that they will answer at the end of this presentation. So I want to begin by turning it over to Danielle and Marie so that you can share your screen, and we will begin.
Hello, everyone. I do hope to find that you and yours are healthy and safe. I'd like to thank the Chesapeake Family and Community Engagement Center for being our host today, and a big thank you to Danielle of Family Insight for co-facilitating with me today. Today's presentation will be provided in a more conversational format that will include some simple parenting tips, including some real life examples and some deeper dive info and tips as well. Our hope is that you'll be able to carry some takeaways from this event and hopefully ease through the process and time period that we're living in right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Danielle to do a quick introduction to talk a little bit about Family Insight, and then we'll get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And of course, to Ms. Brown, thank you for allowing us to be here and share with you all. I'm Danielle Riglioso. I am a licensed therapist. I am the director for Family Insight. We serve the Chesapeake area as well as the surrounding areas. We do outpatient therapy. We do intensive in-home services. We have an autism service, ABA. We do crisis services. We do psychiatry. We have some adult services as well. Just a wide variety of mental health treatment services. And we also have 12 other sites across the state of Virginia and one in Hampton, Newport News that I'm also the director of there. So that's kind of the gist of what we do, just a really fast snippet. I did put our Marie and I's contact information there in the chat, email, website, and contact information. So if you have any more questions, when we're done, or more private questions, you're more than welcome to call. Happy to help however we can. If you've identified a need in your home or within your family or somebody you might know, and you want to reach out for some guidance, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are here to help.
Very briefly, Kempsville Center for Behavioral Health is your community partner specializing in behavioral health care for children and adolescents. We provide inpatient hospitalization for children ages 4 to 18 who are experiencing a mental health crisis. We also offer partial hospitalization, which is an outpatient program that's offered Monday through Friday for children ages 8 to 18. We do offer no-cost mental health risk assessments 24/7, 365. Our clinical assessment team can work with you to determine what is the best next step for your child should you be in that situation. We are available via phone at 461-4565 for more information or to schedule an assessment. And again, as Danielle said, our information's in that chat box. So if you need any of that info, we'll be happy to help any way we can. So let's get started with today's presentation. As a parent, myself and Danielle is as well, and those of you that are viewing, you're probably feeling a variety of emotions right now about COVID-19, the unrest around inequities within our society. You could be experiencing anxiety, fear, anger, burnout, confusion, maybe just an overwhelming sense of chaos and all of the above. We're really in the midst of a series of events that many of us have not seen in our lifetimes. And on top of that, your kid's school has been moved to a hybrid model with no clear answers of exactly what the future holds around the face-to-face format or what the new norm's going to look like. You may have been asked to work from home. Maybe you need to continue at your job as if nothing has happened. But we want you to know that there are resources and viable options that are out there, even though they may feel like those that were readily available are now available only with restrictions or limitations. And on top of that, of course, you want to keep your kids and your family healthy and safe and protect them from the chaos that seems to be mounting every day. It's a lot to handle all at once. So we want you to know we'd like for you to cut yourself some slack. Everybody's doing this with no practice. If you're feeling overwhelmed, know that there are many mental health services that are available in Hampton Roads. And that can include anything from therapy to support groups to even video amenities to connect with clinicians or mental health facilities and parent support groups and things of that sort. So we want you to hang in there, stay safe and stay healthy.
Absolutely. I just want to add into there that, although this time has been really difficult, there was a very small silver lining in the mental health, behavioral health world, and that is telehealth. And it's really expanded. So those who find it challenging to get out, challenging to schedule, challenging to take time off of work to go and see a therapist or work with a counselor, now those challenges are very minimal because you can connect just about from anywhere you are and meet with somebody. And that's local facilities. And maybe one week you have availability to go in and sit down and do some face-to-face counseling. And maybe the next week you don't, and you're able to schedule that via telehealth. So tiny silver lining is the availability and frequency that you can access services now.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, Danielle. So let's just kind of dive into this. Ask your kids what questions they have. And part of the reason I wanted to bring this up is that we as parents sometimes tend to over-explain things to our kids. Our children may ask something as simple as where they came from, and we might, as parents, be inclined to start a big discussion about, oh my gosh, I've got to talk to my kid about reproduction. When in all actuality, our kids only wanted to know like what city they were born in. So we tend to talk to our children in a way that we would like things to be explained to us. So one of the things that I encourage you is to ask your kids what questions they have, but let's ask in a way that's open-ended. I know you can say something to the extent that I know there are a lot of changes going on right now. You might have some questions. What is it that you would like to know? And also be open and honest with them and let them know, hey, I might not have all the answers, but I'll certainly try. I'll give you my best. It opens the ability to start conversation on their level. And it also lets them know that you're engaged. And furthermore, it also lets them know that you're human. And it's better to admit that you don't know something than to make something up or to give them an answer that might be incorrect. It's also an opportunity for you to find the answer to their questions together. So if it's something that you don't know, then that's the time that you can do that together. I do recommend, and I think Danielle would agree with me on this, to make sure you check the content if you do something as far as a web search, and make sure that it's geared towards kids and that it's also factual. You're teaching your kids a valuable skill by seeking accurate information and then also using critical thinking skills. So this goes us to the next slide with regards to allowing yourself to make mistakes. I know one thing I have had to learn as a mom, as difficult as this is sometimes to admit, is that there is no way to be a perfect parent. Our kids don't come with manuals or books. And on top of that, having this experience of being a parent, also the fact that I've never experienced a pandemic and protesting and rioting to this degree before. So I'm literally learning new things as I go along, as is my son. And then also trying to explain to him and have, engaged conversations with him about what's happening. So I think we have to allow ourselves the freedom to make mistakes. And in a moment of panic, which I think we all can admit to some degree that we've done this, you make up an answer to your kid's question super quick, and then later find out that, oh my gosh, what I just shared with you was not right, or what I told you yesterday might not have been correct. At that point, you let your kids know that, what I said wasn't quite right, and then give the opportunity to go over the correct information with them. It is totally okay to tell your kids that you make mistakes sometimes, and that you're willing to admit to error, and then being open to finding out the facts. Or as facts are changing, as I think all of us have experienced, is the CDC on today, or are they not on today? Is the number right today, or is the number wrong today? Things of that sort. Being flexible with that, and then also teaching our kids kind of that flexibility as well, is really a great learning opportunity for you as a parent, but it's also a great learning opportunity for them as well, to realize that things don't always come out like they seem. But if we get new information, this is what the new information looks like.
And I'll share a real life story.
Sure.
Yeah. So, earlier in the pandemic, my daughter's 11, which is 10 at the time. And, I set expectations for her that I never communicated. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But, I made a huge mistake. And I was so frustrated with her. At that point, I was, bringing her into work and trying to juggle having her at home and bringing her into work and having all these things done. And I expected her to pack her lunch, and she hadn't done it. And I can't remember all the details of it, but I was so frustrated and upset that morning. And it set the tone for the whole day, right? Anytime you guys have a rough morning with your kids, it happens probably more often than I'd like to admit. But about maybe 15 minutes into the drive, it just hit me. And I had to stop and I had to apologize to her, because I set expectations for her that at this point in time, like, you're going to make your breakfast, you're going to make your lunch, you're going to, some of these things she did already, she's very capable young lady. And I realized she's never had the responsibility of packing her lunch ever. Even in daycare, even in child, like when she in the summer, in summer camps, like I would pack her lunch, or it would be provided there for her, or it's at the school, or whatever the case may be. And so I had to pause. I had to apologize for getting so frustrated and not realizing and not communicating those needs to her. And so I said, after I apologized profusely, I said, moving forward, these are my expectations now. Things have changed a little bit, and everybody has to play a role in this family, and we all have to work together, and we have to juggle things we've never had to juggle before. And in that, I need you to be responsible for your lunch. So I will put the things out for you. I will make sure you have stuff to pack and let you know what your options are. But my expectation is that's part of you now getting ready in the morning. So it is okay. It's okay. You can
Well, and I think very quickly too, to add to that is, we actually have on the side of our fridge, a dry erase board that we have a list of, these are the things that have to be done on a daily basis. And, it can be something as simple as making sure that the dogs get water. Like, we sometimes just get caught up in the rush and have, again, these expectations that our kids are going to handle what's happening right now or what's going on in the household. And sometimes I need the reminder just as much as they need the reminder of what needs to be done. So, something as simple as a dry erase board on the fridge, or something that just has a list of these are the things to do today, or whatever the case may be, can be helpful. So thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that. So the next slide leads me to something that I think all of us as parents need to say to ourselves just as much as it's to say to our children, is that it's okay to not be okay. Like if we're experiencing a moment of overwhelm, and we're going to talk about parent timeouts later, and also our circle of support and things of that nature coming up here soon. I do want to, just express to you that it's okay to acknowledge that for yourself, but it's also okay to say that to your children. And then also express to them that it's all right to have a whole bunch of different feelings all at once. So for an example, like one of the things that we'll do at the center, especially with our really young kids, is actually draw faces with different expressions, emojis, if you will, and draw them on a piece of paper, maybe just a simple smiley face, or a face with a straight line in the mouth, or a face with a frown, and ask them which one they're feeling in that moment. And they can actually say, I'm feeling a combination of all of these, or I'm feeling happy and everything's great, or I'm not feeling happy, whatever the case may be. But going from that, using that as a jumping off point to actually talk about feelings. And especially with older kids, one of the things that I think is important is that it's okay to feel sad and angry and afraid all at once. But to also, expound on that and really kind of talk a little bit more about other than just being sad. Like give me a word beyond just being sad, to describe how you're feeling in that moment. And also too, telling them that, talking to them about how feelings sometimes come and go depending on what's happening during the day. And that can sometimes relate to food, because I can get hangry in a heartbeat, which my family is not too proud of, and I'm not either. But I can have those moments where I would be really super patient with something, or would handle something a little bit differently. But when I'm hangry, I am feeling a whole bunch of different things all at once, and I am not a very nice person. And I own that, which is part of the reason I now also make sure there are not only snacks in my purse for the people around me, but also for myself, to keep me from that. But I will say that, if kids ask if you're feeling scared, it's really okay to be honest with them and saying something to the extent that sometimes, but here's how I'm helping myself with this, or here's how I'm dealing with this. And then also talk to them about ways to, reduce their stress. And it could be something as simple as taking a walk, or something as simple as deep breathing. We've talked about 4 Square before, and Daniel will kind of go into that breathing a little bit more here in a moment, but just taking that moment and giving them options for how to deal with stress in the moment, empowers them to be able to handle some of it on their own. But then also us kind of taking a time out or checking ourselves and going, okay, I'm feeling really anxious about this presentation, or I'm feeling really anxious about doing something at work tomorrow, whatever the case may be, and being able to check in and go, okay, I actually probably need to take a moment and take a couple deep breaths. But I love some of the tips and techniques that Danielle uses, some of the descriptive words that she uses with regards to deep breathing and things of that sort. I think they're cute. So Danielle, go ahead and take that away.
Sure. So some really fun kind of deep breathing exercises that you can do for yourself or for your kiddos. There is the 4 Square breathing. So it's really simple. You're just breathing, you're drawing a square, you're breathing. So in, out, in, out. So inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. I like the 4-7-8 breathing. So that's You inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, release for 8. And the reason why those kinds of why it doesn't, it's just like, yeah, it takes a few deep breaths. The 4, 7, 8, the square breathing. There's elephant breathing, which is really fun for your little guys. So they make a trunk and they breathe in and then they breathe out. There's breathing like a bumblebee. There's a bumblebee breath, where when you're letting the air out, you buzz like a bee. And so those kinds of activities where they have those, unique names, one, make it a little bit more fun. 2, make it easier to remember. So, and the key to some of these things, like taking walks and some of these coping skills or mechanisms in the deep breathing, is practicing them even when you don't need them, because then they become second nature to you. To remember to breathe. And I love the deep breathing exercises because you can really do them anywhere at any time. The kids love them. I use yoga pretzels in my practice. It's a deck of cards. Anybody can buy them off of Amazon. They're really, really neat. My daughter loves them. All the kids that I work with love them. It's their favorite activity to do in counseling and therapy. A lot of my staff use them as well. But there's different yoga poses. There's all kinds of really fun breathing activities. There's partner yoga poses. And so it's really cool. So they're called yoga pretzels. So you can take a look at that and see if that would be something that would be fun for you and your family to do. But yeah, lots of different stress reductions, walking, exercise, nutrition, of course, is important. Marie mentioned nutrition, hydrating, making sure you're drinking lots of water. Your kids are drinking water, staying hydrated as well. So those are just my few tips for today.
So that's going to lead us to our next slide, which I love this character off of Inside Out, because sometimes I feel like this. So there are moments, and I think sometimes our kids, are just oblivious to how we feel about things. Like there are moments, especially our teenagers and even younger kids, they're so caught up in whatever activity they're doing, or maybe they're caught up with their device, or they're, on their iPad, or they're watching TV, or whatever the case may be. And sometimes they're just oblivious to what we're feeling. So that being stated, there are times though that they may have heard you talking to, your partner or your friends, or, somebody, and I want you to know you have every right to be angry and even enraged with what is or isn't currently happening. But if your kids have overheard you talking with others and ask, why are you upset? That's a great time to have, again, another conversation with your kiddos and really explain that sometimes adults get frustrated, and some things we've got to talk out with other adults. And I think that's also too, trying to keep our anger in check, but also emphasizing to your children that I'm working to keep our family safe. I'm working to keep us healthy. And letting them know that you're there and that you care, and that you love them, and things of that nature, I think are super important. Flying off the handle, if it happens, then because we're human, it's, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've not gotten upset or ever experienced road rage, because that's not being honest. It happens. And, there were moments when I was on 264 several months ago that I felt like I was the only car on the road. And now that traffic's starting to really pick back up, it's kind of like, okay, where did you people come from? And I have some thoughts with regards to that, and I have to kind of keep myself in check. But then I also recognize that that's an opportunity for me to say, okay, yeah, sometimes mom gets mad about stuff, and things are compounding, and there's a lot going on, and that wasn't appropriate. And I recognize that wasn't appropriate, and I'm going to do better next time. And then also just letting my son know that, those things do happen. I am human. But then also giving again, that explanation, that conversation, and that apology, and recognizing, what I can do better. With regards to all of these things compounding for you, I will say that especially right now regarding finances and making ends meet, keep that in check when talking with your kids about it, because there is a huge difference saying to your child, we won't be able to get that toy this month versus we're running out of money. Especially for our little guys, that's an adult situation, and it's really, it's not something that they can process. And with everything else that's going on with them right now, it's just really not appropriate to have those kinds of outbursts or saying those kinds of things. They just can't process what's going on with that.
Yeah, that's part of that mask talk too. Our kids have to go back to school at some point if they're not already back. And you may have an opinion on masks. You may have a very strong opinion on masks, and you may hate them and don't agree with it. But our kids have to follow the guidelines and rules at school. And so if they're going back to school, wearing the mask is a mandatory thing. And so having a positive attitude about following the rules and doing what we're supposed to do is helpful for them, because if they go into school with the attitude of masks are stupid or whatever we may have expressed in front of them, they're going to have a harder time complying. It's already hard enough. We don't need to add any additional stressors to our kiddos. And so just being mindful of those things, that it's just so easy to just say, oh, stupid mask, or I'm so sick of wearing these, or these don't work, or whatever. That's just an example. But the kids are, going back to school, and they are in, the classroom with other kids, and they do have to wear the mask, and they do have to social distance. They do have to sit at the desks with the crisscrossy clear glass or whatever it is. So, taking it and flipping it from a negative to a positive of that, we get to go back to school. You get to see your friends, we may have these things, but at least we get to go back to school. At least we get to, see our friends and have that social interaction. And, at least we're making steps and moving back to some sort of normalcy. I did also too want to mention that anger is a normal feeling. It's actually one that you're supposed to have. So don't ever beat yourself up that you are feeling angry. If you didn't feel angry ever, there's a problem. Because anger tells us that there's something wrong, there's something not right, and it triggers us to investigate what's going on and figure those things out. It's what we do with our anger that's typically the problem, or how we react. But having the feeling of anger, it's completely normal and something that you should experience, because that is part of your alert system. So I just wanted to add that piece in there.
No, I think it's good. I appreciate you saying that. It makes me feel better about my road rage. So that leads us to our next slide. And this is probably one of the most important slides that we have on here. And I think, and part of the reason we wanted to bring this up is that we all have a circle support. And I'm a little, I've said this before in presentations that I've done. I am actually a little anal with regards to my circle of support, if that makes any sense. And what I mean by that is I have those that are closest to me, but I also have a backup plan. And I also have a backup plan for my backup plan. Just because that's how I operate. I'm not saying that that's the best way to do it or anything of that sort. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that it's really important to know who are the people that you're closest with. Who are the people that you would let watch your child overnight. And that could be somebody that is, a family member. It could be somebody that is, a close friend. It could be somebody that you go to church with, whatever the case may be. just knowing who those individuals are and reaching out to them and saying, hey, I just want you to know that you're part of my circle of support, that you're part of my support group. And then also too, knowing that if something happened that you needed to do a quick run to the grocery store, and if you've got younger kids, you feel comfortable enough leaving, the kids with a neighbor, or having somebody just pop over for a few minutes so that you can take a nap. Something as simple as that, I think is so valuable to be able to kind of put into perspective, and kind of keep, again, up to date with those folks and what's happening and what's going on. I've listed here, of course, a whole list of things, from families and friends to people that you work with, to people at church, to even your school counselors, and support groups and community organizations and things of that sort. And part of the reason I included all of those people is there may be a situation where you need support, and being able to say to the school counselor, we are experiencing XYZ. I know that there's a pandemic, but this is just really overwhelming for me. Can you please help me with whatever it may be? Or it's stuff going on with schoolwork, or maybe getting a referral to an outside source for therapeutic services. Or I'm not sure, are there play groups that can possibly get together for our younger kids, things of that nature, and being able to have those conversations. Something as simple as having a conversation with a school counselor, or having a conversation with somebody that you go to church with, or having a conversation with a neighbor may spark expanding your circle of support even more. So and again, this is just me. So I have I'm pretty anal with regards to my calendar. Danielle's seen it. It's color coded. It's pretty intense. But inside my calendar, I have a list of people that if I need something right away with regards to my son, those are the people that I'm going to call first. And I just did it because I know for myself, like if I'm in a panic about something, I don't want to have to think, oh my gosh, okay, all right, I'm going to call my husband first and see. I don't want to have to think about all of that. It's already written down. So I know, okay, this is who I'm going to call first. This is who I'm going to call second, so on and so forth. So just throwing that out there, that it's really important to know who those individuals are, and just know that you are not in this alone. You're not by yourself.
Absolutely. And so we call this that you're building your natural supports. So thinking about who your natural supports are. And one thing that you can do is a great activity is create a bullseye, or like a target circle, and start with the middle. And who are the people that are closest to you, that would be, like Marie says, your very first ones to reach out to. And then as those rings expand, those outer rings are maybe folks like a coach, or a family friend or teacher. And maybe in those middle rings, you've got like an aunt or an uncle, or a relative, or a family friend. And then those tighter ones that are closer in are folks that are, maybe immediate family members, your parents, things of that nature. It really can go any kind of way. I mean, a teacher could be in the middle, or they could be on the outside ring. Somebody from church could be on the inside or on the outside. It doesn't matter. You have to look and see, who are your natural supports? Who do you have in your life that you could reach out to, and where do they fall on that bullseye, on that target? Could be a neighbor, could be, maybe the neighbor has a teenager, 16-year-old teenager who does babysitting. So maybe that's one of your outer circle rings, and so just be thinking about that, and maybe start jotting that down so that you have that readily handy. I did want to mention too, those school counselors are truly, truly wonderful folks. And if you've not tapped into that resource in the school, please do. The school counselors are just so incredibly helpful with our youth. And we want to make sure that we're communicating with them what's going on. Maybe there's something going on at home and they could meet with them at school, or virtually if your kids are still going to school virtually. They've just been a tremendous help to not only my own daughter, but my friends and family members and things of that nature. I've had the pleasure of actually meeting all of the school counselors within the city of Virginia Beach, doing presentations for them. I think Marie has too. And they're just incredible individuals who really care passionately about our youth. And so I would just wanted to leave you with that. It's something that I forgot even existed. So
Well, real quick, because I just got a message that we had a couple of questions. So I'm going to try to answer them super quick before we continue on with our presentation. So I believe one mom mentioned that her child hasn't been around anyone except for her and her husband. I would say in that particular instance, if you have the ability to maybe do some parallel play, I don't know how old the child is, so I'm going to just presume, and I know that's not always safe, but I'm going to presume that it's a younger child. Parallel play is great and can be done, if you have iPhone capabilities, can be done via FaceTime. It's also something that obviously we can do via Zoom, something of that nature. Just really kind of scheduling some play dates for our kids or activities. And I'm sure, if you have older children, they will probably, if they're not already trying to do this on their own, via social media or via Zoom or other means, are communicating with one another. I know some school systems utilize Blackboard and things of that sort, which then give them, again, that video, that two-way video capability to communicate with one another. A lot of our children are already communicating on the internet anyway, so they'll adapt to it and probably adjust to it a lot quicker than you or I will. And I'm not saying that you're not technologically savvy. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just am not always the most tech savvy person. So I would recommend, if you've got the ability to do that, to kind of head in that direction, at least give the opportunity to kind of see one another. One of the things that a neighbor of mine has done is that their kids literally live next door to one another, but they've drawn a line in between their two houses, and the kids are allowed to go up to those lines, but they're not allowed to cross them. So that they'll sit across from each other. They're not allowed to touch one another, but they'll sit across from each other and say, see, here's the truck I got today, or this is what I brought outside today. I brought out my Mega Blocks, and let's play Mega Blocks together. And so one child has their set, the other child has their set, but they're sitting in the yard across from each other, engaging without literally physically touching one another. So that's also a suggestion. I know there was another question with regards to autism support groups. I would suggest CARD, which is actually off of Lynn Haven Parkway in Virginia Beach. And if not CARD, then also the Tidewater Autism Society. So those are two groups that I know have some parent support groups, specifically with autism.
Yeah, there's also, let me chime in there. If you're looking for the support groups, there's the Coffee Talk with the Tidewater Autism Society. And if you link with them on Facebook, they do a lot of presentations there. They have Facebook groups that you can join as well. There are several centers that do a variety of different services, whether it's ABA therapy in the home or in the center, including Family Insight. We also have a center in our Tidewater, in our Norfolk office. And they can also come into the home as well and provide services. And some of that is parent training, applied behavior analysis, things of that nature. But we have quite a few resources here. Again, you're always welcome to reach out to the office. I did put the phone number in the chat box. If you have any questions or need some resources, I'd be happy to connect you with one of my BCBAs who can give you some pretty good guidance on local resources as well.
And that's all I see at the moment. I might be wrong, but that's all I see at the moment. So if you're ready to go to the next slide, we can keep going. So this is going to bring me to the part of the presentation about talking to me and having communication. So obviously, it's essential. You need to stay in touch with the folks that spend the time with your kids on a day-to-day basis. And that could be anything from their teachers, especially if they're middle or high school and they've got multiple teachers that they're working with, to their school counselors. It could also be coaches. I know that there's, a couple of baseball and softball things that are happening right now that are still going on through rec leagues and things of that sort. Just having that open conversation to build not only with your child, but then also create a comfort level where they feel like they can talk to you and you can talk to them. The other thing I think is so important when we're talking about communication is modeling appropriate communication in front of your kiddos, and utilizing, they're going to utilize the cues that you give to them, and they're going to model the kind of communication that you have. So when we talked about that anger piece earlier and me and my road rage, part of the reason I bring that up is because I could have just not acknowledged that at all. And then, when it's time for my son to get behind the wheel, then I'd be too surprised he's doing the exact same thing I'm doing. So I bring that up, just saying that the communication that you show that you're engaged your child at home, but also engage the other people that are involved in their lives. It gives them the opportunity to then have those conversations, not only with you, but then maybe have conversations with other people that they're comfortable with. And I do, along those lines, with regards to teachers and coaches and school counselors, is, if you have a need, express it. Like, share it with those that are working with your kiddo, because you might need a recommendation on how to handle a situation or how to deal with some of the schoolwork. Definitely don't be afraid to ask for help navigating all of this, because this is all new to us. I mean, it's like we walked in and we're like, virtual learning, let's do this. Like it's not second nature to any of us. And then on top of it, I've not experienced in my own educational past virtual learning. That's not something that, I went to high school and experienced. So it's very difficult for me to even relate to what's going on with my own kiddo and his learning experience. So if there are issues when you're at home with schoolwork or whatever the case may be, don't hesitate to say, I need help with this. And that, of course, then circles back around to your circle of support, knowing who it is that you can talk to and have conversations with, and just keeping in mind, we're all in this together. This is new water for all of us. And we're flying the plane, and we're building it. So
at the same time.
Yeah, all at the same time. So, just be patient with yourself in this process. So this is one of my favorite slides. It's one of the most boring slides that we have in this presentation, but it's one of my favorite ones, because I think it's important that we talk about scheduling. Our kiddos need routines, and having, oh my gosh, one day I'm at home, the next day I'm at school. I'm on my computer and I'm in my living room, and oh hey, by the way, I'm also in my living room with my son who's in the home on the computer as well. It just it can be frustrating for all of us. So I do emphasize that schedule, but to a point. You've got to be flexible with it. But get up at the same time every day. We know in this household, 6 a.m. rolls around, we're up. That's just, and it doesn't matter if we're working virtually or we're in person. The other piece is, making sure that we have a consistent bedtime. That's super important, because we need our rest. Our kids need rest, so that we can kind of get ourselves back together, so that we can handle the next day and things that come up. I will say that, if you've learned with this virtual environment that there are times that they take breaks throughout the day. Let them be kids. Like, let them go and run outside for a few minutes. If they get a 10-minute break, let them do it. If they've got lunch at a specific time, that's the time, that I take lunch. When my son does his lunch, I'm doing lunch with him. And part of the reason that I do that is because I don't want to mess up the routine that he's got going. And I don't, it also gives me the opportunity to have, a casual engagement with him and have a conversation that's not necessarily related to school or necessarily related to work. Other time too is making sure that they have social time. They need to interact with their friends that's not always school related. And what I mean by that is giving them the opportunity to have a few minutes to interact with each other online if that's what they're doing, or understand that if they want to participate in outside activities and they're able to, that they need that too. And then finally, this is super, super important, is having downtime or quiet time. I know for me personally, when I'm getting myself ready for bed, or I don't look at my phone 30 minutes before I'm going to bed. And part of the reason I do that is because I don't want the stimulation. But the other piece is it gives me a chance to read and have just quiet, so that there isn't all this noise from Zoom, and there isn't all this noise from the news, and there isn't all this stuff going on with work or whatever. It gives me the opportunity to kind of unwind and have some downtime. So I encourage you, if you can, have that schedule. I'm not telling you to have a calendar that looks like mine and everything's color coded and you're going to do this at this time. I'm not saying that at all. But if you need to, as the reminder, put it on the fridge or put it on the whiteboard. Wake up time is 6 a.m. and we're going to do breakfast from 6:15 to 6:30. And you don't have to do it in 15-minute increments. I'm not saying that at all. But just to be able to have the visual cue that reminds you, but then also reminds your kids that this is the order of things that are happening today. And it could be that you have to do it for the week because of the fact of one day being in person at school versus being at home, but still keeping that schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Consistency is so key. This also goes back to setting the expectations. So set the expectation. This, when you get up in the morning, I expect you to get dressed. I expect you to come down, have breakfast, brush your teeth, sit at your desk. I expect you to sit at your desk while you're engaged in school, not on the couch or here or there. So make sure that it's consistent, and that they know those expectations of what you want them to do, because you may be juggling other kids in the home. You may be juggling work. You may be juggling other kids in the home, other virtual schools and work.
Right.
You may be juggling your entire family home virtually, and you guys each need your separate space. And give yourself some grace. It's, even if you do have a schedule, it's not always going to go as planned. So be flexible,
Right.
but still set those expectations and outlines of what you want and what you expect from your family during this time.
It'll help in the long run for everybody.
Yes.
So this slide I think is super important because yes, it's important for us to keep up to date with news, but there's just some stuff out there right now our kids don't need to know or be exposed to, and it can create anxiety for them. So part of our job as parents is to filter information that our kids have, but then also being able to answer questions from them, and doing so in a gentle and loving way without having somebody on the media kind of setting the precedence for you. I think the other thing, is being exposed to information all the time. There's constant news now, 24/7. If you give the opportunity on the internet, there's stuff on the TV as well. I think that's one of the things that is super important with regards to stimulation, is really paying attention to how much time are your kids being exposed to social media, or how much time are they being exposed to the news, because that can truly impact their level of anxiety. And on top of that, also paying attention to how much you're watching the news and listening to that stuff.
Right.
I talked about this, I think, in the last presentation that I did for Chesapeake, is that there are 2 days a week. And again, I'm not saying this is the perfect thing, but there are 2 days a week that I do not engage on social media. I do not look at the news or listen to it. If there's something big that is important and impactful to my life, either my husband's going to tell me about it, or I'm going to end up getting telephone calls from those people that know that I'm not engaging on social media on a regular basis. They'll call me to tell me if it's that big and I need to know about it. But giving your brain the ability to kind of shut down a little bit and kind of chill out so that you're not being exposed to that all the time, I think is really important. And just purposely scheduling that time to just disengage from all of it. And it could be something as simple as starting out with just not having your phones at the dinner table and actually eating dinner together at the table versus sitting in front of the TV and watching the news while you're eating dinner. Just kind of putting your phones to the side. And also you've got the ability, we've got smartphones now, so they're smart enough that we can lock them so that we're not engaging on social media. And also too, if you're able, then disabling reminders on apps is also quite helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now that, our kids are on the computer all day, and newsflash, even when they're in school, they're still on the computer all day. That's why they're so good at using the Chromebooks. So, surprise. I was really shocked how well she could utilize PowerPoint and all these things and Google Docs, and not realizing how much they actually use the computer at school to begin with pre-pandemic. But if that's how you're engaging socially, it's so crucial to, one, monitor what your kids are now looking at or viewing on social media, monitoring those phones, iPads, computers, things of that nature, keeping in mind of that. And then two, also just that disengaging, because if we're using it to connect socially, we then need downtime too, where we're not having that screen time. So a few things to keep in mind. Yeah, and I know we're probably running short on time, but
yeah.
I know, but my daughter, I always grew up with no talking to boys. Girls, you don't call boys, you don't talk to boys on the phone. If they call, that's fine. But now we're in this new age where they have iPads and they can text and all of these things, and then all of a sudden it was the only way you could socialize. So then that kind of goes out the window. So, it is a different time. And so really thinking about, okay, maybe this is okay for now. But when the pandemic ends, or when we're kind of back to normal life, or our new normal, that maybe this isn't what we're going to continue doing, or putting some ground rules, or kind of rethinking or thinking outside the box when it comes to that stuff.
No, I think ground rules are quite helpful. It gives a little bit of structure, and then at the same time too, we go back to those expectations. They know what they are and then aren't surprised by them when there are consequences should they not follow the ground rules. So really quickly, because I know we are running a little bit short on time, I do want to make sure that we emphasize that one of the best things that you can do for your kiddos is actually to take care of yourself. And that can be physically and emotionally. And especially during this time of crisis, kids are watching us like hawks for what they're supposed to do during a time of stress. So we've got to be really good role models and really teaching them appropriate stress reduction skills, but then also giving them tools for their tool belt and recognizing that, it is not, self-care is not an indulgence. It's not selfish. It's not a one-time experience. And being able to have them engage with you in whatever good practice you decide to implement. So that can be something as simple as the deep breathing that we talked about before. It's also too acknowledging and taking a parent time out. So that's where your circle of support comes in. So I know, if I am having a really bad day and I still don't have food in the fridge because I haven't gone to the grocery store because I just don't have time between driving to work and driving home and whatever the chaos may be for you, it's okay to take a parent time out. and having a relief person that helps you so that you're not trying to do all this on your own. And the great thing sometimes about being a parent is meeting other parents, and so that you can actually trade off kid watching time, so that you can take a break and they can take a break. Or it could be that you're working together with other families so that those days that you're working virtually, where they're working virtually from home, maybe it's my designated day to watch not only my own child, but also my neighbor's kids, so that it gives my next door neighbor the opportunity to do what they need to do. So I definitely want to point out that, self-care is really important. And I think a lot of times we get so caught up in taking care of everybody else or doing everything for everybody else that we feel like self-care is an indulgence, or it's time consuming, or I don't have the ability to do that right now. I want you to know that, one, you are not alone. We are in this. And on top of it, you taking care of yourself is going to be a great example for them that they're going to then implement and start to do some of the things that you're doing, which ultimately is going to be a win-win-win for everybody that's involved.
Absolutely. You can't take care of anybody else unless you take care of yourself. And so just remembering it, even if it's just something small, stepping outside to breathe in some fresh air, get a little sunshine. If you find that this is hard, which many of us do, because we sacrifice for our kids, that's just what we do as parents. Write it into your planner, write it into your calendar. I'm going to take a bubble bath. I'm going to paint my nails. I'm going to, go outside, set a alarm on your phone that you're going to take a 5-minute break and go outside and breathe some fresh air. So it doesn't have to be something elaborate. It can be very simple. I used to have a staff who would take herself to breakfast every Wednesday morning before work. And she would just have that quiet alone time. So, think outside the box with those things, but make sure that you are taking care of you so that you can be healthy and take care of others.
Absolutely. This device drives me crazy. It really does, because I'm not a huge social media, internet having access all the time. But that being said, the great part about it is it does give me the ability to set those little reminders. So even if it's not in my colorful planner that I carry around with me on a regular basis, I do get a reminder to get up and walk around so that I'm not sitting sedentary all day. So there are some perks to the phone, I'll admit it. So going back to the basics, I will say with regards to self-care, super important to make sure that you're eating a balanced diet. When was the last time you had a proper, and then on top of it, are you eating, a bunch of complex carbohydrates on a regular basis and down in a bottle of wine every night? That's not going to cut it. So making sure that you're eating properly, not a bunch of processed foods. And I know that, I'm guilty of it. I'm just going to whip through Chick-fil-A and get me some chicken. And it happens. But at the same time, being able to have, a good nutritious meal is super important. We talked about water earlier. I cannot emphasize, I think you've probably seen Danielle and I both drinking water while we're doing this presentation.
And focus on it. So
it's not because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so parched from this presentation. It's more of, oh my gosh, I need to make sure I'm drinking enough water every day so that I'm staying hydrated. Dehydration can lead to, fog. It can also lead to restlessness. It can also lead to me forgetting stuff. I mean, something as simple as that. So make sure you're getting hydrated. Sleep. Rest is so important as well, making sure you're getting enough sleep. And then I am a big proponent of exercise. My family knows that there is an hour Monday through Thursday that mama is doing exercise, and that is her time. And that's my time to really kind of get myself back together so I can give them my best. And then the final thing is to also make sure you're connecting with other people, just being able to have that sense of belonging, that sense of connection, again, utilizing your circle of support. And it may be something as simple as a text message back and forth with a sibling, or something as quick as a call. Hey, I'm just checking in on you, want to make sure everything's okay. But making sure you have that connection with folks, not only inside the home, but outside of the home. And then defining what's best for you. Like for me, it's exercising. For me, you know, it's that hour of time that I take to either do kickboxing or running or something of that sort. That might not be your forte. Your thing may be sitting down and reading a book during a bubble bath or whatever the case may be, but making sure you know what that is and then scheduling that into your time. And then additionally, you know, that parent timeout we just talked about and that quiet time, we all need them. We need them just as bad as our kids do. So making sure again, coming back to that circle of support, who's your relief person, and maintaining those relationships so that you can tap into them when you need to. And she said it so beautifully just a moment ago. Danielle mentioned grace. We got to be patient with ourselves. This is new territory. So, you know, being patient with ourselves and having grace in all that we do is super important. Whew. We're almost done, folks, I promise.
It's 2 more slides, this one and one more.
We're almost there, because I know somebody said she had to tuck her little human in bed, and I'm hurrying. I do think that we have to kind of be prepared for what to anticipate, you know, making sure our kids are aware of, you know, what's going on. We talked about this within, you know, giving them expectations and making sure that they know what those are and setting them for them, but also setting them for yourself. And it might be a situation where you have to sit down and have these conversations of what your expectations are, but then also be prepared, because especially your older kids are going to come back and say, well, what can I expect from you in return? Be prepared for that conversation, and know that it's a two-way street, that you've got to be able to give them some in return. And then knowing that there's that accountability to them, but then also the accountability to you, I think is important. And I have to say this, it's something that I've seen over my career and even in my own household. Children that know what the expectations are much more confident in the way that they handle themselves on a day-to-day basis, and are able then to define success for themselves, whatever that may be. And success can be something as simple as, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to have a good day. Or I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to have breakfast by 7 o'clock, or whatever the case may be. But knowing that what their expectations are, know that they will have more confidence in how they carry themselves and what they do. And then
reaching out for support too. I mean, you know, when you don't.
No, absolutely. And also knowing too, like what works for me in my household might not work for somebody else in their household. You know, we've got to be flexible as parents. As we are learning and navigating being a parent, much less a parent during a pandemic, you know, what works for one of your kiddos might not work for the other. So if you have multiple kids in your home, you know, please understand that too. And be open to recommendations and suggestions from, you know, other professionals, whether it's their teacher at school or the school counselor or their coach, or if you do have somebody that you're working with, whether it be a therapist or an ABA or whatever the case may be, just, you know, recognizing that they're a part of your support network, and being open to maybe what their suggestions are to make things hopefully easier in your home.
Absolutely.
All right, so this is the last piece, because this is something that I think will be helpful, or I hope will be helpful, especially when we talk about our kiddos and virtually and in person and virtually and in person. Oy vey. That being stated, I think it's important to be consistent with your location. You know, at our home, in our home, it's the dining room table, which is also where we eat dinner. So we have this designated space that is utilized to get work done or get school stuff done. But we also realize that once we're completed with what it is that we're doing, we close the laptop and we put it up. There's a shelf that I have, a bookshelf that's here, that's in my living room that I'm able to put my work stuff on so that it's separate from here. So our eating space doesn't become completely overrun with everything that's going on with work and school. But being consistent, this is where I'm going to be sitting today. And I'm going to be sitting here tomorrow and possibly the next day. This is my spot. The other piece is limiting the distractions. So any loud noises, other pets in the home, are your kids going to be distracted by that? Because if that's the case, then we've got to limit that interaction so that they can focus on school and their schoolwork. It could be something as simple as taking a poster board and making a trifold for them. Please know that your kids have done SOL testing. They are very, very familiar with the trifold.
Yeah.
Something as simple as a poster board folded into threes and then set up in front of them. And that's something that then can be their space. If they are able to work in that space better, I will say that they can decorate the outside of it, but I wouldn't necessarily decorate the inside of it just to kind of keep the distractions to a minimum. Also using earbuds and headphones.
Those are life-saving.
Bingo. Absolutely, they're life-saving. And they're using those in school anyway when they do stuff.
And they're using them now when they go back. They've always used them in school, but even more so now because they are integrating still some virtual teaching while in school. And so, if you haven't got them some headphones, we ended up getting the big ones, because they were more comfortable than having something in her ear.
Right.
So
right.
Think about what's going to be comfortable that they can wear regularly.
Right. I think too, also knowing what their schedule is for the day, because this school, the teachers have been pretty good about making sure, okay, we're going to do this at this time, lunches at this time, so on and so forth. Maybe getting that schedule and kind of putting that information in your phone so that you can set a timer if needed to be able to say, okay, once the teacher says, okay, we're going into a break session or we're going to lunch at this time, as a reminder for you, so that if you need to take a time out too, that's when you can take it. You can take it with your kid, or no, at least that's when your kid should be off the computer. I think that's probably helpful. Danielle gave a really great idea, and in fact, I've been using it myself when I'm working here at home. Is putting a pillow behind my back so that it helps with proper posture. I have a tendency of hunching over as I sit here at my table, because again, I'm sitting in my dining room chair. It's not like I'm sitting in my cushy chair in my office with my rolling wheels. And I tend to hunch over, and then I get tired quicker and maybe not as alert as I need to be. So the great thing about having that pillow behind my back is it forces me to sit up straight. And by doing so, it also is making me more alert and paying attention a little bit better.
Right. That posture is crucial, especially like where the keyboard is, where they're not leaning over because the table's too low. They're not trying to reach upwards, but they've got that even keel there, putting them somewhere in home, similar to their desk at school that are their size.
And I wanted to also two other things, and then I'm done. One is with regards to the reward system. I think that this is something that you can consider, especially if they're on task. And it can be done with something as simple as a jar and some cotton balls, or even popsicle sticks. So each time you are seeing them on task and doing the appropriate behaviors, again, you've got to be clear with what the expectations are so that they know what the reward is, but then gives them the accountability. So if they're not following through with whatever the rules are for the reward system, they're very well aware of it. The other piece is too, also letting the teacher know that this is something you're doing at home to try to help your son or daughter stay on task, but giving them a reward system for staying on task while they're in school online. And it can be something as simple as, if you get so many cotton balls or so many popsicle sticks that, you're going to get some money towards a game, or you'll have an extra 15 to 30 minutes of TV time, or whatever the case may be. Again, you have to kind of set those parameters with your kids as far as the reward system is concerned. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up as far as other suggestions is your kids have been exposed to quite a few tactile objects within the classroom, whether that's a whiteboard, a dry erase board, or if it's something like dominoes or blocks or Legos or things of that nature. And sometimes those objects, especially for our younger kids that are learning something as simple math, can utilize those objects in the interactions of working out some of their homework or doing some of their things. And for the older kids, obviously supplemental assistance can be found quite easily online as far as tutoring and YouTube videos for how to do algebra problems. And by the way, I am not math should be numbers for me, like only numbers. So anytime you integrate letters and things of that sort, it's not my cup of tea. I don't enjoy it. That being said, there are quite a few tutorials that are online that are quite helpful with that as well. So don't hesitate to utilize the internet in that moment to be a help and not a hindrance. Whew.
Yeah.
So, Eunice, are there any questions that we?
Okay, I do. There is one that did come up, and I hope that the mother is still on. I see that she is the mother of a first-time middle schooler who has a 504, and of course, everything like that has just gone out the window. And she was asking if they don't know her child, how can she let them know? And one of the things I did want to share is there's something that I do with every parent that comes here into the center. I talk about creating a student profile, and that you can use pandemic or no pandemic. And it's simply a way that teachers can find out information about your child quickly that would take them 3 to 4 months. I consider a parent, I would call them a HIS, they're the home information specialist. So what you do is you create a profile. You tell them what they like, what they don't like, their favorite subject, their worst subject, things that supports and accommodations that help them in the past. So if you are interested in creating a profile and you want to know more about it, just contact us at the center. I have several samples that I can share with you, can actually send them to you through email so that you can create a student profile, and you're going to find that it's going to be something that you probably not only use during the pandemic, but after the pandemic. It's great to do at the beginning of the year when your child gets a new teacher.
And I do encourage everybody to communicate with the teacher throughout the week. Let them know what you're doing. Let them know that you're working, or that you have a huge meeting and you're going to be tied up all day, or that you have multiple kids in the home. Communicate. The teachers love it when parents talk to them, right? And tell them what their needs are, what's going on, so that they know what to expect, or that maybe it makes sense that we're a little disheveled today because or not on task because we've got a lot of other things going on in the home. So that's back to that communication piece. Communicate, communicate, communicate.
Okay, I want to thank Marie, who is the Director of Community Relations from Kempsville Behavioral Center, and Danielle Riglioso, who is the Director of Family Insight PC in Virginia Beach, for taking the time to talk with us today about a subject that is timely and needed. And this was a very excellent conversation that we had tonight. I do want to remind the audience that this recording will be placed on YouTube as soon as we have it ready, and it is closed caption. So look for it within the next week. I want to thank everybody for attending, and I want to bid you a fond good night.